Hello everyone, welcome back and Happy New Year. We're starting with another Pharisee story. We're reading Luke 11 verse 37. When Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him, so he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee, noticing that Jesus did not first wash before the meal, was surprised. Then the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people, did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But give what is inside the dish to the poor, and everything will be clean for you. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give God a tenth of your mint, rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces. Woe to you, because you are like unmarked graves which men walk over without knowing it." Let's break this down. The kind of washing the Pharisee was talking about wasn't necessarily about hygiene, but it was more about ceremony. So Jesus says that the Pharisees are like a cup that is clean for show, but isn't the inside of the cup more important? And Jesus reminds him that God created both the outside and the inside of man, but we choose what to do with it. If you are kind to the poor and destitute, then your soul will be good. Jesus mentions that they do give, but they give because of the law. They give a tenth of what they own, but they do not give anything outside of that. It's not charity, it's just trying to make God happy, because that's what he commanded of you. He mentions that they then hold themselves up in the Jewish community as good people. And then he uses a metaphor which I find interesting in that culture, walking over a grave defiled a person, even if it was unmarked. This is why grave markers were important and are still used today. But Jesus says that the Pharisees were like an unmarked grave. They defile the Jewish people. That was quite the condemnation. One of the experts in the law answered him, "Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also." This Pharisee is referenced as a lawyer in other translations. He should have just stayed quiet because Jesus responds to him. Jesus replied, "And you, experts in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift up one finger to help them." This is the art of having too much power. I did some research, and it surprised me that they actually had some checks and balances, which almost makes it worse. Pretty much all governments have a system of checks and balances. There is the question of if it is a good system in both theory and practice. The American government has a pretty good checks and balance system, but maybe in practice it's not always the best. That's a discussion for another time. The Roman Empire, at least at the time of Jesus, after that, look, there's a lot of history, but the Roman Empire during this time gave the Jews quite a bit of room to make their own laws, as long as it didn't conflict with the empire's laws. I found it kind of funny that the Jewish government had something similar to America, because they were composed of two groups called the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who had an assembly composed of the two groups, and they both hated each other, and they both sucked. This is kind of funny timing because I'm working on a mini essay kind of about this subject. I don't know when I'll finish it, and it probably won't be any good, but hey, it's coming. Anyways, the Sanhedrin was supposed to be a group that brought God's will to the lives of the Jewish people, but they craved power too much. Here's an example of a law that the Sanhedrin came up with. They taught that on the Sabbath, a man could not carry something in his right hand or his left hand across his chest or on his shoulder, but you could carry something with the back of your hand, with your foot, with your elbow, or in your ear, your hair, or in the hem of your shirt, or in your shoe or sandal. Why the heck would you make that a law? I don't know if I've seen anything on this level before. They craved power so much that they weren't even being logical and were just making random laws, because they were on a constant power trip. They weren't doing God's will, and I'm not sure they were even doing their will, but they wanted to make laws so bad that they were oppressing the Jewish people. Let's read on. Woe to you, because you build tombs for the prophets, and it was your forefathers who killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your forefathers did. They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs. Because of this, God in his wisdom said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill, and others they will persecute. Therefore this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for all. This is an interesting passage. Jesus mentions that in the past, many prophets were ignored. This is very true. During most of the actual kingdom of Israel, which you can read about in 1st and 2nd Kings, many false prophets ignored the actual prophets appointed by God. Then Jesus prophesies that they will persecute future prophets and apostles. That is very true. Most of the disciples and others like Paul will be shunned and persecuted, possibly by these same people Jesus is talking to now. Some will get stoned, some will get crucified upside down, and so that generation of Jews is the most destructive. It's kind of amazing in a bad way. They killed all of the most important people in the Christian movement, including the apostles and the Messiah himself. I would not want to be that generation. Just a couple more sentences left. Woe to you, experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering. This is a concluding statement saying that these Pharisees were not being holy, and they were keeping others from being holy. When Jesus left there, the Pharisees and teachers of the law began to oppose him fiercely and to besiege him with questions, waiting to catch him in something he might say. So yeah, obviously you probably know that things don't go well. At this point, they're trying to see what evidence they can get to condemn him. But that's the strange thing about the gospel, because even though it's bad, good comes out of it. But we still have a lot more to read. Thanks everyone, have a good year.